I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Patrick Moore pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the airplane window, watching Montana's rugged landscape shrink beneath him. His weathered hands clutched a cardboard tube containing a bottle of black Maple Hill bourbon, a rare find he'd spent months tracking down for Rose. The bottle represented more than just expensive liquor. It was an apology, a peace offering, a reminder that despite the long absences, he still thought of her. The cabin announcement crackled overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some air traffic congestion in Portland. We'll be holding for approximately 20 minutes. Patrick checked his watch, the third delay today. His 12-hour journey was stretching even longer. He ran a hand through his short, military-precise haircut, feeling the day's stubble on his face. At 38, the former Army Ranger carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced death and decided to keep living anyway. "Another delay?" asked the businessman beside him, not looking up from his laptop. "Third one today," Patrick replied, his voice low and steady. The man nodded and returned to his screen. Patrick pulled out his phone, thumbing through photos of Rose. Her smile, bright and captivating, had been what first caught his attention 5 years ago. In the latest pictures, that smile seemed different, somehow tighter around the edges. He'd been away teaching wilderness survival courses more than he'd been home these past 6 months. Too many weekends spent showing strangers how to build shelters and start fires, while his own home life smoldered. The surprise visit had been a last-minute decision. Rose and her friends were at a cabin in Tillamook State Forest for their monthly getaway. He called her yesterday, listening to her enthusiastic description of the wine they'd packed and the hiking trails they planned to explore. He hadn't mentioned that he'd be joining them. "This is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for landing. We'll be on the ground in Portland in approximately 15 minutes. Patrick tucked away his phone and straightened his seat. The bourbon felt heavy in his hands, a tangible weight of expectation. This weekend will be different. This weekend, he'd remind Rose why they fell in love. That'd be why the time he collected his rental car, night had fallen. Rain pattered against the windshield as he navigated the winding forest roads, headlights cutting through fog thick as smoke. His GPS signal faded in and out, the monotone voice occasionally cutting through the sound of raindrops and windshield wipers. The wilderness felt familiar to Patrick. He'd spent years teaching people how to survive in places just like this, how to read the terrain, how to find their way when all markers disappeared. Tonight, he was following coordinates to something he thought he already possessed, a happy marriage. After nearly an hour of driving, a small cluster of lights appeared through the trees. The cabin. Patrick's mouth curved into a rare smile as he parked 100 yards down the road. The element of surprise was essential. He wanted to see Rose's face when he appeared at the door, bourbon in hand. He stepped out into the rain, zipping his jacket against the chill. The bottle was secure in its tube, protected against the elements. Patrick moved silently through the trees, his footfalls barely audible against the forest floor, a habit from his ranger days that had never quite left him. The cabin glowed warmly against the dark forest. Laughter drifted through the partially open windows, female voices rising and falling like music. Patrick recognized Rose's laugh, immediately bright and unrestrained, the way it used to be when they first met. He stepped onto the porch, boot soles squeaking slightly against the wet wood. Through the window, he could make out shapes moving around what must be the living room. His hand was halfway to the door when Rose's voice cut through the night air, clear as a bell. "If Patrick vanished, that insurance money could clear my debts." Patrick froze, hands suspended in air. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard. Another voice blares, he recognized, replied with a laugh. "Or finally date his brother guilt-free." More laughter followed. Patrick stood motionless on the porch, rain soaking through his jacket. The bourbon felt suddenly heavy in his hand. Its significance transformed in an instant. He lowered his arm slowly. Inside, the laughter continued, unaware of the witness outside. Patrick placed the bottle carefully on the porch railing, its shape barely visible in the darkness. Without making a sound, he turned and walked back the way he came, disappearing into the shadows of the forest and the rental car. Patrick sat with the engine off, rain drumming on the roof. His face remained expressionless, but his knuckles were white against the steering wheel. He didn't slam his fists or curse. Instead, he breathed in and out the way he'd been trained to do in crisis situations. He turned the key in the ignition and drove away from the cabin, away from the laughter, away from the life he thought he knew. The Portland airport buzzed with early morning travelers, but Patrick moved through the crowds like a ghost. His phone remained off. He had no interest in calls or messages that might come from the cabin once they discovered the bourbon on the porch. The questions that would follow. The excuses that would be made at the ticket counter. He purchased a one-way ticket to San Jose, Costa Rica. The agent glanced up at him, noting his lack of luggage. Just a spontaneous trip? She asked with practiced cheerfulness. Something like that, Patrick replied, his voice neutral. He paid in cash, collected his boarding pass, and moved towards security. In the waiting area, he powered up his laptop. With methodical precision, he deleted his social media accounts one by one. He transferred money from their joint accounts to a separate one, leaving enough that Rose wouldn't immediately notice the difference. He canceled his credit cards. With each click, each deletion, Patrick Moore became less visible to the world. 6 hours later, the plane touched down in Costa Rica. The humid air hit him as he exited the terminal, a physical embrace so different from the cold rain of Oregon. He hailed a taxi and gave directions in fluent Spanish, a skill acquired during multiple deployments, to a remote jungle lodge 2 hours from the city. The lodge appeared through the trees like a memory. Patrick had helped build it 3 years ago, part of a veterans rehabilitation program. The wooden structure blended with the surrounding forest, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Ernesto, the caretaker, greeted him with surprise, but asked no questions when Patrick requested a room indefinitely. That was the unspoken code among the veterans who passed through if someone needed space. They got it. No questions asked. That night, Patrick sat on the balcony of his small room, listening to the jungle sounds. Insects hummed, birds called, the occasional howler monkey screeched in the distance. He hadn't cried. He hadn't raged. Instead, his mind worked with the cold efficiency that had kept him alive in combat. Rose had betrayed him not just with words, but possibly with his own brother. She had imagined him gone, had calculated what his absence would be worth. The woman he'd trusted with his life had valued that life in dollars and cents. Patrick pulled out a notebook and began to write, planning his next moves with the same precision he'd once used to plan extraction missions. By dawn, he had the beginnings of a strategy. This wouldn't be a hasty retreat, it would be a calculated disappearance. For the next 2 weeks, Patrick disappeared into the rhythm of the jungle. He helped with maintenance around the lodge, hiked through the dense forest, and spent hours sitting in silence, processing what had happened and what would come next. He grew a beard, let his military short hair begin to lengthen. Small changes that altered his appearance just enough that on the 15th day, he borrowed Ernesto's phone and made a single call to an encrypted number. When a woman's voice answered, he said simply, "Maritza, it's me." The call from Ronan came 17 days after Patrick had arrived in Costa Rica. He was sitting on the lodge's communal porch, whittling a piece of local hardwood, when Ernesto approached with a satellite phone. "Call for you," Ernesto said, his expression grave. "Man says he's your brother-in-law." Patrick took the phone, his face revealing nothing. "Hello, Patrick? Jesus Christ, Patrick, is that you?" Ronan's voice cracked with emotion. "It's me." A choked sob came through the line. "You're alive. Oh God, you're alive. Where are you, man? Everyone thinks." Ronan broke off, his breathing ragged. "Everyone thinks what?" Patrick asked, though he already suspected the answer. "She's missing. The cabin caught fire." Ronan's words tumbled out in a rush. "They found part of a body in the ashes. They think it's you, man. They think you're dead." Patrick remained silent, processing this information. A fire. A body. His presumed death. "Patrick? Are you there?" Ronan's voice rose in pitch. "I'm here." Patrick's tone remained level. "Tell me what happened." The cabin burned down 3 days after the girls' weekend. Fire marshal said it was electrical. They found remains. Not much left. They assumed it was you because Rose said you'd surprised them that weekend. Said you'd stayed behind when they left. Ronan paused, then continued more quietly. She collected on your insurance already, and now she's gone. Gone where? Nobody knows. She cleared out your accounts, packed up, and disappeared the day after the insurance money came through. Ronan hesitated. Patrick, what the hell is going on? Where are you? I'm safe, Patrick said. That's all you need to know right now. But the body wasn't me. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Ronan spoke again. What do you want me to do? Nothing. Tell no one we've spoken. As far as the world knows, Patrick Moore died in that cabin. But I need your word, Ronan. Another pause. You have it. After ending the call, Patrick returned to his whittling, the knife moving with deadly precision against the wood. The pieces were falling into place. Rose had taken the opportunity his disappearance had provided. The bourbon on the porch evidence he'd been there. The convenient fire. The insurance payout. That night, Patrick made another call, this time to Maritza Vega. Their connection went back to his final deployment, where she'd been the NSA analyst assigned to his Ranger unit. They'd saved each other's lives more than once, forging a bond that transcended romantic entanglements. I need to trace someone, Patrick said when she answered. I was wondering when you'd call again, Maritza replied. Your wife's been busy. You've been watching. After you called 2 days ago. Of course I have. She's in Arizona. New name, new hair color, same spending habits. She's making withdrawals small amounts, different ATMs. Classic pattern. Can you send me what you have? Already compiled. Check your secure email in an hour. Maritza paused. Patrick, there's something else. She's not alone. Patrick's hand tightened around the phone. Holden. No. The friend. Blair. Patrick absorbed this information. Keep tracking. I'll be in touch. Over the next week, Patrick prepared. He studied the information Maritza sent, memorizing addresses, patterns, routines. He exercised relentlessly, pushing his body back to its peak condition. He secured new identification through contacts that didn't ask questions. He booked a flight to Phoenix under his new alias. The morning of his departure, Ernesto handed him a machete, a parting gift. Whatever battle you're fighting, the older man said, remember that surviving is sometimes the best revenge. Patrick nodded, accepting the blade. I plan to do more than survive. As the plane lifted off Costa Rican soil, Patrick watched the green jungle canopy recede. He was returning to American soil, not as Patrick Moore, the betrayed husband, but as a ghost, a calculating ghost with a very specific purpose. The Arizona heat hit Patrick like a physical force as he exited the airport. So different from the humid warmth of Costa Rica or the cool rain of Oregon. This heat stripped away pretense, left nothing but bare reality. Appropriate, he thought, for what he was about to do. His rental car paid for with cash and new identification hummed beneath him as he navigated toward Sedona. According to Maritza's information, Rose and Blair had rented a luxury condo on the outskirts of town. They were living as cousins, both with dyed hair and new names. Patrick checked into a motel 30 miles away, paying for a week in advance. The room was basic bed, desk, bathroom, but the anonymity was precisely what he needed. He placed a single bag on the bed and removed a burner phone. There was one call he needed to make before proceeding further. He dialed a number from memory, waiting through 4 rings before a wary voice answered. Hello, Holden. It's me. Silence stretched so long that Patrick thought the connection had failed. Then a shaky inhale. This isn't funny. Whoever this is. The last time we spoke, Patrick interrupted, was at your apartment in Bozeman. You were drinking that Japanese whiskey you can't pronounce properly. You told me Rose had called you, upset about my latest teaching trip. Another silence, shorter this time. Patrick, Holden's voice cracked. They said, they found your body. They found someone's body, Patrick corrected. Not mine. Jesus Christ. Holden's breathing quickened. Where are you? What happened? Rose said. I know what Rose said. Patrick kept his voice even. I need to see you. In person. Of course. Anything. When? Tomorrow. The Pinewood Diner, off Highway 17. Noon. I'll be there. Holden paused. Patrick, I need to tell you something. Tomorrow, Patrick said, and ended the call. He spent the rest of the day and evening preparing. He reviewed Maritz's files again, studying photographs of Rose and Blair entering their condo, shopping, dining out. In each image, Rose looked carefree, radiant, even a woman enjoying newfound wealth and freedom. Patrick's face remained impassive as he memorized their routines, their patterns, their weaknesses. At 8:11 the next morning, Patrick arrived at the diner, selecting a booth with a clear view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. He ordered coffee and waited, watching the door with the patience of a predator. Holden arrived at 11:58, 2 minutes early, always eager to please, even now. Patrick observed his younger brother scan the diner anxiously. Holden had lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally styled hair lay flat against his head. When Holden spotted Patrick, his face underwent a rapid series of transformations: shock, relief, fear, and finally, a terrible guilt that confirmed what Patrick already suspected. "Patrick," Holden whispered as he slid into the booth. "My God, it's really you." He reached across the table, but Patrick made no move to reciprocate the gesture. "You look terrible," Patrick observed. Holden withdrew his hand, a flush spreading across his pale cheeks. "I haven't slept well since they found the body. Since they said it was you. And why would that disturb your sleep?" Patrick's tone remained conversational, but his eyes never left his brother's face. "Guilt, perhaps." Holden flinched as if struck. "What do you know?" "I know Rose collected $2 million in life insurance." Patrick took a sip of his coffee. "I know she and Blair disappeared shortly after. I know they're living in Sedona under false names." He set down his cup with deliberate care. "What I don't know is how much you knew about their plans." Holden's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted. I didn't think she would." He broke off, swallowing hard. "You have to believe me." "I don't have to believe anything," Patrick replied. "But I will listen to what you have to say." And so Holden talked. The words poured out of him. How Rose had first approached him 3 years ago, during one of Patrick's longer teaching assignments. How it had started as innocent flirtation, then evolved into something more. How he tried to end it multiple times, but Rose always pulled him back in. She knew exactly what to say. Holden explained, his voice low, how lonely she was, how you didn't understand her, how I was the one who really saw her. Patrick's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened briefly around his coffee cup. 2 months ago, she started talking about getting rid of you. Holden couldn't meet Patrick's eyes. "I told her she was crazy. I said I wouldn't have any part of it. That's when I ended things for good. Yet you didn't warn me." Holden's shoulders slumped. "I convinced myself she was just venting, that she didn't mean it." He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Then they found the body, and she was so convincing with the grief. I thought maybe I'd been wrong about her intentions, that it really was an accident, until she disappeared with the money." Holden nodded miserably. "I've been looking for her. I thought if I could find her, confront her." He trailed off, then asked, "What happened, Patrick? Where were you when the cabin burned?" Patrick considered how much to reveal. "I overheard Rose and Blair talking at the cabin, about how my death would solve Rose's financial problems, about how she could then be with you guilt-free." He watched the color drain from Holden's face. "I left that night, disappeared to Costa Rica. The bourbon I brought for her, that was the only evidence I'd been there at all. Then who was in the cabin? Who died?" "That," Patrick said, "is one of many questions Rose needs to answer." Holden wiped his face with a napkin. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to need your help." Patrick leaned forward slightly. "Rose doesn't know I'm alive. She doesn't know I'm here. I want to keep it that way until the right moment." "What do you need from me?" "Contact her. Tell her you found out where she is. Tell her you want to join her, that you've realized you made a mistake ending things." Fear flashed across Holden's face. "She's dangerous, Patrick. If she realizes I'm helping you." "She won't," Patrick assured him. "Not until it's too late." Holden hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it. Whatever you need. I owe you that much." Patrick's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes," he agreed. "You do." Back in his motel room, Patrick established a makeshift command center. Maritza had sent more information: bank records, credit card statements, phone logs. The picture they painted was both familiar and strange. Rose had been planning this for longer than he'd realized. His phone buzzed with a text from Holden. Called her. Meeting set for Friday. The Gallery Cafe in Sedona. 3 p.m. Patrick sent a one-word reply. Good. He had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to transform a loose plan into a precision operation. He contacted Maritza again, this time with specific requests. I need recording equipment, he told her. High quality, undetectable. Already on its way, she replied. Delivery to your motel tomorrow. What else? Background on the body they found. Maritza was silent for a moment. That's trickier. I've been digging, but the fire destroyed most of the evidence. Dental records were inconclusive. The official report says the intense heat damaged the teeth too severely for proper identification. Patrick frowned. Then how did they identify the body as mine? Rose's statement. Your wallet found nearby. The bourbon bottle with your fingerprints. It was enough for a preliminary identification, especially when no one was looking for alternatives. Keep digging, Patrick instructed. There's more to this than convenience. After ending the call, Patrick stretched out on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind drifted back through his marriage, searching for warning signs he'd missed. That Rose's spending had always been an issue: designer clothes, expensive trips when he couldn't join her, the renovation of their Montana home that had somehow doubled in cost. He'd attributed it to different priorities, had tried to compromise. Now he wondered if those had been tests, seeing how much she could take before he protested. Then there was Blair, always whispering in Rose's ear, always present for those girls' weekends that seemed to coincide with his teaching trips. He found their friendship odd, but had never suspected conspiracy. And Holden. His younger brother had always idolized him, had followed him into the military only to wash out in basic training. Patrick had never sensed resentment, only a desperate desire for approval. The perfect target for Rose's manipulations. The pieces fit together now, forming a picture of calculated betrayal. Rose hadn't just wanted his money, she'd wanted his life erased, replaced with a narrative that cast her as the grieving widow, free to build a new life with his insurance payout. Patrick's phone buzzed again. A message from Maritza. Check your email. Found something. The attached file contained newspaper articles about missing persons in Oregon around the time of the cabin fire. One in particular caught Patrick's attention: a homeless veteran, approximately Patrick's height and build, last seen 2 days before the fire, about 10 miles from the cabin. Another piece slid into place. Not just opportunity, but premeditation. The body hadn't been a convenient accident. Someone had been murdered to complete the illusion of Patrick's death. His resolve hardened. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, it was about justice. For himself, and for a nameless veteran who had deserved better than to become an anonymous casualty in Rose's scheme. The recording equipment arrived the next day, disguised as a package from an online retailer. Patrick spent hours familiarizing himself with the devices: a pen that contained a high-definition microphone, glasses with a built-in camera, earbuds that would allow Maritza to communicate with him remotely. By Thursday evening, everything was in place. Patrick had memorized the layout of the Gallery Cafe, had run through multiple scenarios of how the meeting might unfold. He'd prepared Holden via text, giving him precise instructions on what to say, how to act. Friday morning dawned clear and hot. Patrick rose early, going through a series of exercises that cleared his mind and prepared his body. By noon, he was positioned in a rented office space across from the cafe, watching through high-power binoculars as staff prepared for the lunch rush. At T2:30, Holden arrived, visibly nervous but following instructions. He selected a table on the patio, ordered a drink, and waited, checking his watch repeatedly. At T2:58, a red convertible pulled up to the curb. Rose emerged, her once auburn hair now platinum blonde, cut in a stylish bob. She wore oversized sunglasses and a flowing white dress, the picture of carefree affluence. She didn't scan her surroundings. She didn't check for threats. The confidence of someone who believed they'd gotten away with the perfect crime. Patrick watched as Holden stood to greet her. Even from a distance, He could see his brother's hands trembling. Rose embraced him, kissing both cheeks, then sat across from him, leaning forward eagerly. Through his earpiece, Patrick could hear their conversation clearly, thanks to the microphone hidden in Holden's watch. "You look amazing," Holden was saying, his voice only slightly strained. "The hair, it suits you." Rose laughed, a sound that once would have warmed Patrick, but now left him cold. "New life, new look," she replied. "I'm calling myself Elise now. Elise Carter. Suits you." "You look terrible," Rose said, reaching across to touch Holden's face. "You haven't been sleeping." "It's been a difficult time," Holden admitted, and Patrick had to give his brother credit. He was following the script perfectly. "First Patrick, then you disappearing. I've been worried." Rose's expression softened into practiced sympathy. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was leaving. It was all so overwhelming. The fire, the funeral. I needed a fresh start. The insurance money must have helped with that." A flash of something wariness perhaps crossed Rose's face, but she recovered quickly. It did. Patrick always insisted on that policy. Ironic, isn't it? He spent so much time preparing for the worst-case scenario, and then... She trailed off, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "You never told me exactly what happened," Holden said. "Why Patrick was at the cabin alone." Rose sighed. "He surprised us that weekend. Showed up with some expensive bourbon. You know how he was, thinking gift could make up for never being around. He seemed off, distant. When the girls and I left on Sunday, he said he wanted to stay an extra day, clear his head." She reached for Holden's hand. "If I'd known it was the last time I'd see him," the fire marshal said. "It was electrical," Holden prompted. "That's what they think. Old wiring in that place. I always said it was a hazard." Rose squeezed his hand. "But let's not talk about sad things. You said on the phone you had something important to tell me." Holden hesitated, then plunged ahead. "I made a mistake, ending things with you. I was scared, confused. But losing Patrick, seeing how fragile life is, it made me realize what really matters." Rose's smile widened. "Oh, Holden, I missed you. I've thought about you every day." "You have." Holden managed to sound both surprised and pleased. "Of course." Rose leaned closer. "It was always supposed to be you and me, you know that. Patrick was an obstacle. And now..." She stopped abruptly, perhaps realizing she'd said too much. "And now..." Holden pressed. Rose backtracked smoothly. "And now we have a chance to start over. Together, if that's what you want." "It is," Holden assured her. "But Rosalie's $2 million doesn't last forever. What happens when it runs out?" She laughed again. "Oh, Holden, $2 million is just the beginning. Patrick had investments, property. Once all the paperwork clears, there'll be more. Much more." She stroked his cheek. "And I want to share it with you. We could travel, buy a place somewhere tropical. Costa Rica, maybe." Patrick always talked about it. In his observation post, Patrick felt a cold satisfaction. Every word Rose spoke was being recorded, each confession and implication captured for later use. "That sounds perfect," Holden was saying. "When can I see you again?" "Why wait?" Rose smiled seductively. "I've got a beautiful condo. Blair's out shopping for the day. We could go there now." Holden hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." As they stood to leave, Rose suddenly paused. "One thing, though. I need to know I can trust you, Holden. That you're really with me now." "Of course you can trust me," Holden replied, a tremor in his voice. Rose studied him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Then there's something I should tell you. About the fire. About Patrick." Through his binoculars, Patrick could see Holden tense. "What about it?" Rose glanced around, then leaned in close. "Not here. At the condo. But let's just say things aren't always what they seem." They walked to Rose's convertible, Holden following like a man in a trance. Before getting in, he glanced in Patrick's direction, a brief, almost imperceptible look that conveyed both fear and determination. Patrick activated his earpiece. "Maritza, you getting all this?" "Crystal clear," her voice replied. "Your brother's doing better than I expected. Stay with them. I'm moving to Position 2. Position 2 was another rented room, this one in the same complex as Rose's condo. Patrick had secured it 2 days earlier, ensuring it offered a direct line of sight to her unit. By the time Rose's convertible pulled into the complex's parking lot, he was already in place, equipment ready. Through his earpiece, he could hear Rose leading Holden into the condo, offering him a drink, music playing in the background. Their conversation turned intimate, Rose clearly trying to seduce Holden into forgetting his questions. But his brother, for once, stayed focused. "You were going to tell me about the fire," Holden reminded her, after refusing a second glass of wine. "About Patrick." There was a pause, then Rose's voice, lower now. "Are you sure you want to know? Some things, once you hear them, you can't unhear." "I'm sure," Holden replied. "The body they found," Rose said after another pause. "It wasn't an accident, Holden. And it wasn't Patrick." "What do you mean it wasn't Patrick?" They identified what I told them to identify," Rose interrupted. "A wallet, a bourbon bottle with his fingerprints. Enough to convince them, especially when I played the devastated widow." "Then whose body was it?" Holden's horror sounded genuine, and Patrick realized his brother hadn't known this part of the plan. "Does it matter?" Rose's voice had a hard edge now. "Some homeless vet Blair found. No one will be missed. What matters is that Patrick is legally dead, the insurance money is ours, and we're free to be together." "You killed someone?" "For the insurance money. Not me personally," Rose clarified, as if that made a difference. "Blair handled the details. I didn't want to know specifics. But yes, sacrifices were made. For us, Holden. For our future." There was a long silence. Then Holden spoke, his voice barely audible. "What about Patrick? The real Patrick? Where is he? Who knows? Who cares? He probably ran off to Costa Rica or some other place he was always talking about. By the time anyone figured out the body wasn't his, if they ever did, I'd have been long gone with the money. And if he ever came back," Rose laughed dismissively, "he won't. But if he did, well, let's just say Patrick isn't the only one with survival skills." Patrick had heard enough. He activated his earpiece again. "Maritza, did you get all that?" "Every word," she confirmed. "It's more than enough. Tell Holden to wrap it up. Get out of there. We move to the final phase tomorrow." Through the binoculars, Patrick watched as Holden made excuses to leave, promising to return the next day. Rose seemed disappointed, but not suspicious. She walked him to the door, kissed him goodbye, unaware that her confession had just sealed her fate. That night, alone in his motel room, Patrick allowed himself to remember Rose, 5 years ago, laughing at a joke he'd made during their first date. Her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her green eyes bright with interest as he explained his work with the Wilderness Survival School. "So you teach people how not to die in the woods," she'd summarized, smiling over her wine glass. "Something like that," he'd replied, captivated by her directness. Their courtship had been swift, intense. Rose brought color and noise into his carefully ordered life. After years of military precision, of life-or-death decisions in combat zones, her spontaneity felt like freedom. The wedding had been small. Patrick's brother and a few ranger friends, Rose's colleague Blair, and her brother Ronan. Rose had worn a simple white dress, wildflowers in her hair. Patrick had felt a happiness he'd never thought possible after the things he'd seen and wore. The first cracks appeared during his teaching trips. Rose hated being left alone, complained that the wilderness school took too much of his time, that the pay wasn't worth the separation. "Why can't you get a normal job?" she'd asked during one particularly heated argument. "Something with regular hours, better pay." "This is what I know," he'd explained. "This is what I'm good at." Rose had stormed out, slamming the door behind her. When she returned hours later, she'd been conciliatory, apologetic. He now wondered if she'd been with Holden that night, comparing the brothers, calculating which one offered the better return on investment. Then came the spending clothes she wore once, furniture replaced on a whim, weekend trips with Blair that strained their budget. When Patrick raised concerns, Rose accused him of being controlling, of not trusting her. "If you were around more, you'd understand why I need these things," she'd argued. "They help me feel less alone." Patrick had backed down, accepted more teaching assignments to cover the expenses, creating a cycle that pushed them further apart. The night he'd caught her flirting with Holden at a family dinner, he'd confronted her afterward. Rose had laughed it off, called him paranoid, said Holden was like a brother to her. "You're the only one for me," she'd assured him, and he believed her because he'd wanted to believe. Now, staring at the motel ceiling, Patrick wondered when exactly the plotting had begun. When Rose had transitioned from resenting his absences to seeing them as opportunities. When she decided that he was worth more dead than alive, that IT didn't matter now. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. Tomorrow, Rose would discover that her perfect crime had one fatal flaw. She'd underestimated her husband's capacity for survival and for justice. Patrick woke before dawn, his body automatically alert after years of military discipline. Today was the day. The culmination of weeks of planning, of evidence gathering, of calculated patience. He dressed methodically in clothes selected for their anonymity: dark jeans, a gray t-shirt, a light jacket despite the heat. Nothing that would draw attention or stick in memory. He checked his equipment one final time. Recording devices, phone, the small leather case containing evidence carefully compiled by Maritza. His phone buzzed with a text from Holden. She called. Wants to meet at the condo at noon. Says she has exciting plans to discuss. Patrick replied with a thumbs-up emoji out of character, but Holden would understand the meaning. Everything was proceeding according to plan. 11:30. Patrick was in position in the rented room across from Rose's condo. Through binoculars, he watched as Blair left carrying shopping bags, her now black hair pulled into a tight ponytail. One variable removed from the equation. Holden arrived at 11:58, punctual as always. Patrick observed his brother's nervous posture as he approached the door, his hand rising to knock, hesitating, then completing the motion. Rose answered wearing a flowing sundress, her smile bright as she ushered Holden inside. Patrick switched from binoculars to the remote viewing app Maritza had set up, linked to the camera in Holden's watch. The image was slightly grainy but clear enough to show Rose pouring champagne, her movements graceful and practiced. To new beginnings, she was saying, handing Holden a glass. Holden accepted it with a weak smile. New beginnings. Rose settled beside him on the couch, closer than necessary. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about the money eventually running out. Oh, Holden's voice cracked slightly. You're right. Rose continued, oblivious to his discomfort. $2 million isn't enough for the life we deserve. That's why I've been working on accessing Patrick's other assets. The properties in Montana, his investment accounts. She leaned closer. It's taking time, but my lawyer says within a month we'll have it all. Another $3 million at least. Holden swallowed hard. That's impressive. It's just the beginning. Rose traced a finger along Holden's jaw. I was thinking we could start in Costa Rica. Patrick always talked about that Veterans Lodge, remember? Buying land there. We could do that, build something of our own, away from everyone who knew us before. Sounds perfect, Holden managed. But Rosalise, there's something that's been bothering me. About the body they found. Rose's expression cooled slightly. I told you that's been handled. But what if someone investigates further? What if they realize it wasn't Patrick? No one's looking, Rose assured him. The case is closed. Patrick Moore is officially dead, and Elise Carter has no connection to him. She stroked Holden's hair. You worry too much. Always have. That's why you need me to show you how to take what you want from life. Holden's discomfort was visible now. And what about Blair? Is she coming with us to Costa Rica? Rose laughed. Blair? God, no. She served her purpose, but I'm not sharing the future with her. Once everything's finalized, once we're ready to leave. She made a dismissive gesture. Blair will get her cut, but that's the end of our partnership. You just discard her? After everything she did for you, business is business, Rose replied with a shrug. And our business together is concluded. She set down her champagne glass and moved even closer to Holden. Enough talk about Blair. Let's discuss more interesting topics. As she leaned in to kiss him, the doorbell rang. Rose frowned, pulling back. Are you expecting someone? Holden shook his head, looking genuinely surprised. No. Are you? Blair has a key, Rose muttered, standing. Wait here. Patrick watched through the camera as Rose moved to the door, checked the peephole, then frowned deeper. She opened the door cautiously, chain still in place. Yes. Can I help you? Delivery for Elise Carter. A male voice replied. Rose hesitated, then closed the door to remove the chain. When she reopened it, Patrick stepped into view, his expression neutral, his posture relaxed. For a moment, Rose didn't react. Her brain seemed unable to process the image before her. Her dead husband, very much alive, standing on her doorstep. Then the color drained from her face, her mouth opening in a silent scream. "Hello, Rose," Patrick said quietly. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Rose stumbled backward, champagne glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the tile floor. Her face had transformed into a mask of shock and terror. "This isn't you can't be," she stammered, her back hitting the wall. Patrick stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. "I think we have some things to discuss, don't you?" Holden stood from the couch, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I'll, give you two some privacy." "Stay," Patrick ordered without looking at his brother. His eyes remained fixed on Rose, who seemed to be cycling through shock, fear, and calculation. "Patrick," she finally managed, her voice steadying. "Oh my God, you're alive. I can't believe it. We all thought the fire." "Yes, the fire," Patrick interrupted. "Convenient timing, wasn't it? Right after I disappeared. Right after I overheard you and Blair discussing how much better off you'd be if I were dead." "What? No, that's not." Rose's eyes darted between the brothers. "Holden, what is he talking about?" Patrick stepped further into the room. "Let's not waste time with denials, Rose. I was there that night at the cabin. I heard everything." He glanced around the expensively furnished condo. "The insurance money seems to have been put to good use." Rose's expression shifted, fear giving way to something harder. "Fine, you caught me. But can you blame me? You were never there. Always off in the woods, playing hero to strangers while I sat home alone. So you decided I was worth more dead than alive." Patrick's voice remained calm, devoid of emotion. "And not just figuratively. $2 million in life insurance, plus the Montana properties, the investment accounts. You had it all calculated down to the dollar, didn't you?" "It wasn't like that," Rose protested, her composure returning. She took a step toward Patrick, her posture softening. "It started as a joke, that's all. But then you disappeared, and the police found a body, and everyone assumed what you led them to assume," Patrick corrected. "My wallet at the scene. The bourbon bottle with my fingerprints. The convenient witness you to identify the remains. I made a mistake," Rose admitted, her voice breaking. "A terrible mistake. But I can fix this." She moved closer, her hand reaching for his arm. "We can fix this, Patrick. Together. The money's still there, most of it, anyway. We could start over, go anywhere you want. Costa Rica, like you always talked about." Patrick didn't flinch from her touch, but neither did he respond to it. "There's just one problem with that plan, Rose." "What's that?" A flicker of hope crossed her face. "The body in the cabin." Patrick's gaze was unyielding. "A homeless veteran Blair found. No one who would be missed, you said." Rose's hand dropped away. "I never wanted, that wasn't my idea. But you benefited from it," Patrick pointed out. "You collected the insurance money. You assumed a new identity. You planned a new life, built on the foundation of a murdered man. What do you want from me?" Rose demanded, her tone shifting from pleading to defensive. "Money? I'll give you half. More than half. Just tell me what you want." "Justice," Patrick replied simply. "For the man in the cabin. For myself." Rose's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly do you plan to get that? If you go to the police, it's your word against mine. I'm the grieving widow who made a mistake. You're the husband who abandoned his wife without a word, who let everyone believe he was dead." "That might be true," Patrick conceded, "if all I had was my word." He reached into his jacket and removed a small digital recorder. "But I have so much more." He pressed play, and Rose's own voice filled the room. "The body they found, it wasn't an accident, Holden. And it wasn't Patrick. Some homeless vet Blair found. No one who'll be missed." Rose lunged for the recorder, but Patrick was faster, stepping back, keeping the device out of her reach. "That's just the beginning," he told her. "I have hours of recordings. Your conversations with Holden, your plans for the money, your intentions for Blair once she's outlived her usefulness." "You set me up," Rose hissed, turning on Holden. "You miserable, spineless." "He did what a brother should do," Patrick interrupted. "He helped bring the truth to light." So what now? Rose demanded, backing away from both men. You turn me in? Ruin both our lives? Because if I go down for this, Patrick, I'm taking you with me. Every fight, every cruel word, every time you chose your precious survival school over our marriage. I'll make sure the world knows exactly who Patrick Moore really is. Patrick smiled for the first time since entering the condo. It wasn't a warm expression. You misunderstand, Rose. I'm not here to argue or negotiate. I'm here to inform you that it's already done. What's already done? Confusion replaced anger in Rose's eyes. The footage was sent to the FBI's Insurance Fraud Division an hour ago, along with documentation of the financial transactions that followed my death. Copies went to the local police and to your brother Ronan. Patrick set the recorder on the coffee table. By now, they're probably already processing the warrants. As if on cue, sirens became audible in the distance, growing steadily louder. You wouldn't, Rose whispered, her face ashen. After everything we had together, what do we have, Rose? Patrick asked, genuinely curious. Was any of it real? Or was I always just a means to an end for you? It was real, Rose insisted, desperation entering her voice. In the beginning, it was real. I loved you. Part of me still does. Yet you planned my death, collected the insurance, and moved on without a backward glance. The sirens were very close now, the flashing lights visible through the condo windows. Rose looked around frantically, like a trapped animal seeking escape. It's not too late, she said urgently. We can still fix this. I have cash, passports. We could leave now, together. Start fresh somewhere they can't find us. Patrick shook his head. The time for fresh starts is long past, Rose. Then let me go, she pleaded. Just walk out that door. Give me a 10-minute head start. For what we once had, Patrick. For the man you used to be. That's just it, Patrick replied as car doors slammed outside. I'm not the man I used to be. That man died in the fire you arranged. Heavy footsteps approached the door, followed by an authoritative knock. Police! Open up. Rose's face crumpled, her mask of control finally shattering completely. I'll tell them you knew, she spat, a cornered predator making its final attack. I'll tell them you helped plan it all, that you wanted the money as much as I did. Patrick moved to the door, his expression unchanged. Tell them whatever you want, Rose. The truth has a way of burning through lies. He opened the door, stepping aside as uniformed officers entered, followed by men in FBI jackets. Elise Carter, one of the FBI agents asked, approaching Rose. That's not my name, she replied dully. Rose Moore, then, the agent corrected. You're under arrest for insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they read Rose her rights, Patrick watched without emotion. The woman being handcuffed was a stranger to him, now a ghost from a life he no longer recognized. As his own point, one of the officers approached Patrick. Mr. Moore, we'll need a statement from you as well. Patrick nodded. I have everything prepared. Recordings, documentation, timelines. Whatever you need to ensure justice is served. As they led Rose toward the door, she looked back at Patrick one last time. This isn't over, she warned, her green eyes cold and hard. You'll regret this. I promise you that. Patrick met her gaze without flinching. No, Rose. It is over. It was over the moment I heard you planning my death. He turned away, effectively dismissing her from his life. And I never regret doing what's necessary to survive. The police station hummed with activity, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across tired faces. Patrick sat in an interview room, a cup of untouched coffee cooling on the table before him. He'd been there for hours, methodically recounting every detail of the night at the cabin, his escape to Costa Rica, the evidence he'd gathered since returning. The door opened, and Detective Morris entered, a thick file folder in hand. In her 40s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, she'd been respectful but thorough in her questioning. Mr. Moore, she acknowledged, taking the seat across from him. Thank you for your patience. We verified your timeline against the evidence. Your documentation is impressively comprehensive. I've had practice keeping detailed records, Patrick replied. Survival instruction requires attention to detail. So does building a case. Morris opened the folder. We detained Blair Connolly at Phoenix Airport. She was attempting to board a flight to Mexico with $50,000 in cash and 3 different passports. Patrick nodded, unsurprised, and rose, refusing to speak without her lawyer present. Morris studied him. She's claiming you orchestrated the entire thing that you wanted to disappear, collect the insurance through her, then frame her when you got what you wanted. If that were true, why would I turn myself in? Why provide evidence that exposes insurance fraud that allegedly benefited me? That's the question her lawyer will have trouble answering. Morris closed the folder. The body from the cabin were working to identify him. Preliminary DNA suggests a veteran named Michael Keegan, reported missing from a Portland homeless shelter 3 days before the fire. Patrick's jaw tightened. He deserved better. Yes, he did, Morris agreed. Ms. Connolly is being more forthcoming than your wife. She claims Rose planned everything, that she was just following orders. Blair was always happy to follow Rose's lead, as long as there was something in it for her. Morris leaned forward slightly. One thing I'm still not clear on, Mr. Moore. When you discovered your wife's betrayal, why not come forward immediately? Why the elaborate counter-operation? Patrick considered the question carefully. When you've been ambushed in hostile territory, detective, your first priority isn't fighting back. It's assessing the threat, gathering intelligence, and preparing a response that ensures not just temporary safety, but lasting security. He met her gaze directly. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was facing before I acted. Morris nodded slowly. The military training never quite leaves you, does it? No, Patrick agreed. It doesn't. Well, she said, standing, barring any new developments, I think we've covered everything for now. The FBI will want to speak with you about the insurance fraud aspects, but that can wait until tomorrow. She offered her hand. You're free to go, Mr. Moore. Is there somewhere you're staying locally? Patrick shook her hand. I have arrangements. Outside the police station, the Phoenix heat hit like a physical wall. Patrick paused, adjusting to the brightness after hours under artificial light. Holden waited by a rental car, his posture rigid with tension. It's done? He asked as Patrick approached. For now, Patrick confirmed. Blair tried to run. They caught her at the airport. Holden exhaled shakily and rose, claiming innocence. It won't work. Patrick climbed into the passenger seat. The evidence is too strong. As Holden pulled away from the curb, an uncomfortable silence filled the car. Finally, he broke it. I know you can never forgive me for what happened with Rose. I don't expect that. But I want you to know, I don't want your apology, Patrick interrupted, his voice level. What's done is done. What matters is what you did when it counted. Holden glanced at him, surprised. You're not angry. I was angry, Patrick corrected. Now I'm just finished with all of it. He looked out the window at the desert landscape passing by. Drop me at the motel. I'll be leaving in the morning. Going back to Costa Rica. Patrick shook his head. Montana first. There are things I need to handle there. The survival school, among other things. Patrick turned to study his brother's profile. You did the right thing, Holden. Remember that when the guilt tries to tell you otherwise. Holden's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I'll try. At the motel, Patrick collected his few belongings quickly. There was one call he needed to make before leaving Arizona behind. It's over, he told Maritza when she answered. Rose and Blair are in custody. The evidence was enough. I never doubted it would be, she replied. What now? Now I rebuild. Patrick sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the past weeks. I'm going back to Montana. After that, I'm not sure. The lodge in Costa Rica is always an option, Maritza suggested. Ernesto asks about you. Maybe. Patrick hesitated. I appreciate everything you did. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have, Maritza contradicted with a laugh. But it might have taken longer and been messy, eh? Her tone softened. You know where to find me if you need me. After hanging up, Patrick lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since overhearing Rose's words at the cabin, he allowed himself to feel the full impact of what had happened, the betrayal, the grief, the cold calculation required to bring justice. He didn't cry. He simply acknowledged the emotions, let them wash through him, and then, with the discipline that had kept him alive in war zones, he set them aside. Tomorrow would be a new day. The first day of a life that was entirely his own creation. The Montana cabin appeared through the trees like a memory made solid. Patrick slowed his truck, taking into familiar sight the weathered logs, the metal roof, the porch he'd built himself during leave from his last deployment. 6 months had passed since he'd last seen it, but it felt like years. He parked and sat for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The forest sound surrounded him, wind through pine needles, a woodpecker's distant tapping, the gurgle of the creek behind the property. This had always been his true home, more than any house he'd shared with Rose. The key was still hidden in the hollow beneath the third step, untouched. Inside, a fine layer of dust covered everything, but otherwise the cabin was exactly as he'd left it. Patrick moved through the rooms methodically, opening windows to release the stale air, inspecting for any damage or signs of intrusion. Finding none, he unpacked his few belongings and began the process of reclaiming the space that by evening. He had a fire going in the wood stove, the surfaces were clean, and fresh sheets covered the bed. He sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching darkness settle over the forest. No bourbon. That chapter was closed. Over the next week, Patrick re-established his routine. Morning runs through the forest, maintenance around the property, communications with the wilderness school about resuming his teaching schedule. He spoke with his lawyer about reclaiming his legal status, reversing the death certificate, regaining access to his accounts. The processes were complicated but not insurmountable. News filtered in from Arizona through Detective Morris, who called with updates. Rose's trial was set for spring. Blair had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony. The evidence against both women was overwhelming. Holden would testify as well, his involvement in the aftermath deemed minimal enough to avoid charges. Patrick absorbed these developments with detached interest. The outcome of the trials mattered less to him than the fact that justice was proceeding. His focus now was on the future, on rebuilding what had been taken from him, not just possessions and legal status, but purpose. 10 days after his return, a rental car appeared on the forest road, winding up toward the cabin. Patrick watched from the porch, immediately recognizing the driver. Maritza stepped out, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her smile cautious but genuine. "You found me," Patrick observed as she approached. "You're not that hard to find if you know where to look," she replied, climbing the porch steps. She studied him for a moment. "You look better. I feel better." He gestured to the second chair. "Coffee, please." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching clouds drift across the Montana sky. Maritza had been part of his life for over a decade, first as the analyst assigned to his ranger unit, later as a friend who understood the weight of the secrets they both carried from their military days. "How long are you staying?" Patrick finally asked. Maritza shrugged. "A few days, if that's okay. My channel's on hiatus until next month." Her off-grid homesteading YouTube channel had grown surprisingly popular, offering practical advice without the doomsday rhetoric common to survival content. "Stay as long as you want," Patrick said. "The guest room's yours." That evening, they grilled trout that Patrick had caught from the creek, eating on the porch as the sunset painted the mountains gold and crimson. Maritza filled him in on her life since they'd last spoken face-to-face, new self-sufficiency projects, a book deal with a small publisher, potential speaking engagements. "What about you?" she asked as darkness fell. "What comes next for Patrick Moore?" He considered the question. "The Wilderness School wants me back. They're expanding their veterans program, free survival training for former service members, especially those dealing with PTSD. Sounds perfect for you." "It feels right," Patrick agreed. "And I've been thinking about that land in Costa Rica. Not for living, necessarily, but maybe as an extension of the program. A place where veterans can go when they need more time and space to heal." Maritza nodded thoughtfully. "Creating something meaningful from all this. I like it." "It's not forgiveness," Patrick clarified, staring into the darkness. "I don't forgive what Rose did, what she tried to do, but I won't let it define what comes next. That's the Patrick I know," Maritza said softly. "Stubborn as hell, but always moving forward." Later, after Maritza had gone to bed, Patrick remained on the porch. The stars were brilliant above the mountains, untouched by city lights. He thought about the path that had led him here from the battlefields of his military service to the personal war he'd just fought and won. Different battlegrounds, same survivor. Rose had tried to erase him, to reduce his existence to an insurance payout. She had failed. Patrick Moore was still here, still breathing, still building. That was its own form of victory, perhaps the only kind that truly mattered in the end. 3 months later, Patrick returned from a week-long wilderness course to find a letter waiting in his mailbox. The Phoenix postmark and prison return address told him everything he needed to know about its sender. He carried it inside along with the rest of his mail, but set it aside, unopened. That evening, Maritza called. She'd been splitting her time between her own property in Idaho and Patrick's cabin, their friendship evolving into something neither felt the need to define or rush. "How was the course?" she asked after they'd exchanged greetings. "Good. Challenging. Had a Marine with severe PTSD who finally slept through the night on the third day. Called it a damn miracle. Sometimes just being in the trees is healing," Maritza observed. "Any news on your end?" Patrick's eyes drifted to the unopened letter. Rose sent something from prison. A brief silence. "Are you going to read it?" "Haven't decided." He turned the envelope in his hands. Nothing she could say would change anything. "True," Maritza agreed. "But sometimes closure isn't about the other person. It's about you being ready to close the door completely." After they ended the call, Patrick built a fire in the wood stove, more for the comfort of the ritual than for warmth in the mild spring evening. He poured a cup of tea and finally opened the envelope. Rose's handwriting, once so familiar, filled the single page with tight, controlled letters. No greeting, no "Dear Patrick." Just words. They're saying 20 years minimum. Blair got 12 with her plea deal. All those years lost because you couldn't just stay gone, couldn't just let me have the fresh start I deserved. I gave you 5 years of my life while you were off playing hero in the woods. I deserve compensation for that time. I deserved happiness. The lawyers say there's no point appealing. The evidence is too strong. Your evidence. So meticulously gathered, so precisely presented. Always the careful planner, weren't you? Except when it came to our marriage. That never received the same attention. Holden visits sometimes. Brings me books, tells me about his new job. He's trying to make amends, I suppose. It's pathetic. He was always the weaker brother. That's why I chose you first. You were the stronger one. The one who could provide security. Until you couldn't. Until your devotion to strangers outweighed your devotion to your wife. Do you ever think about what could have been? If you've been different? If I've been different? Sometimes I dream about Costa Rica. About the life we talked about building there. In another world, maybe we're there now, happy. In this world, I sit in a concrete cell while you roam free. I don't forgive you for this. I never will. The letter continued onto the back page, but Patrick had read enough. He tossed the pages into the wood stove, watching as the flames consumed Rose's bitter words, turning them to ash. He didn't need to see the final page, didn't need to know that it contained a half-drawn sketch of their wedding photo. Rose's attempt at emotional manipulation, at invoking memories of happier times. Patrick added another log to the fire, watching the last of the letter disintegrate. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the harm she'd caused. Just more accusations, more self-justification. It was exactly what he'd expected. Rose had never accepted responsibility for her actions in their marriage. Why would she start now? He carried his tea onto the porch, settling into his chair to watch the stars emerge. The letter had stirred no emotion in him, no anger, no hurt, no regret. Just a calm certainty that he'd done what was necessary, and now it was truly over. His phone buzzed with a text from Maritza. "Everything okay?" Patrick typed back a simple reply. "Yes." Door closed. 2 weeks later, a courier arrived at the cabin, requesting Patrick's signature for a registered package. The return address was a law firm in San Jose, Costa Rica, unfamiliar to him. Inside the package was a thick envelope containing legal documents, a set of keys, and a handwritten note. Patrick spread the papers across his kitchen table, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The documents were in Spanish, but Patrick's fluency allowed him to understand their significance. a deed to a substantial property in Costa Rica, 50 acres of jungle and coastline adjacent to the Veterans Lodge, where he'd stayed after fleeing Oregon. The property had been purchased 6 years ago by James Carver, a former ranger who had served with Patrick in Afghanistan. Carver had died 3 months earlier of complications from injuries sustained during his service. His will, included in the package, left the Costa Rican property to Patrick with specific instructions for its use, for the healing of those who carried the burden of war home with them. The note, written in Carver's distinctive scrawl, was brief but clear. More that if you're reading this, I finally lost the battle with these damn lungs. No regrets. I lived longer than the doctors gave me, saw more beauty than most get in 100 years. The land is yours now. Do with it what I couldn't. Build something that matters, something that lasts. For the next life, Carver. Patrick read the note twice. Memories of Carver flooding back. His booming laugh, his uncanny ability to spot danger before anyone else, his quiet determination to find purpose after their service ended. They'd lost touch in recent years, but Patrick had heard that Carver was living in Costa Rica, focusing on conservation projects with fellow veterans. Now Carver was gone, but his final act had been one of extraordinary generosity, a gift that aligned perfectly with the direction Patrick had been considering for his own future. That evening, Patrick called Maritza. "I've been left land in Costa Rica," he told her without preamble. 50 acres next to the Veterans Lodge. "Wow," she replied after a moment. "That's significant." "Who from?" "James Carver. We served together. He died 3 months ago." "I'm sorry," Maritza said softly. "I know losing a brother in arms is never easy." He left it with specific intentions for veterans' healing. Patrick took a deep breath. "I think I need to go down there, see the property, figure out what's possible." "When are you thinking?" "Next week, after I finish the current course." He hesitated. "Would you come with me? Your perspective would be valuable." "Of course," Maritza agreed immediately. "I like to see this place that means so much to you." The following week, they flew to Costa Rica together. The jungle welcomed Patrick back with its heat and vitality, so different from Montana's more restrained beauty. Ernesto greeted them at the lodge with genuine warmth, insisting they stay as his guests while they explored the property. The land itself exceeded Patrick's expectations. Stretching from the road to a secluded beach, it encompassed dense jungle, a freshwater spring, and a natural clearing on a rise overlooking the Pacific. Standing there, watching the waves break against the shore, Patrick could almost feel Carver's presence's vision for what this place could become. "It's perfect," Maritza said, joining him at the edge of the clearing. "I can already see cabins there along the tree line. A communal space here. Paths down to the beach for sunrise therapy sessions." Patrick nodded, the possibilities crystallizing in his mind. A place where the jungle itself becomes part of the healing process, where veterans can disconnect from triggers and reconnect with themselves. "What will you call it?" Patrick considered for a moment, thinking of all that had led him to this point: the betrayal, the fire, the hard-won justice, and now, this unexpected gift. Phoenix Point, he decided, a place of rebirth from the ashes. That night, they sat on the lodge's communal porch, listening to the jungle sounds that had comforted Patrick during his darkest days. Ernesto had prepared a traditional Costa Rican meal, shared with the veterans currently staying at the lodge. The conversation flowed easily, stories of service and survival exchanged without judgment or expectation. Later, alone on the porch, Patrick found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not just for survival, but for creation. For building something meaningful from the wreckage of his former life. "You're smiling," Maritza observed, returning from the kitchen with 2 cups of local coffee. "It looks good on you." "I was thinking about fire," Patrick replied, accepting the cup. "How it destroys, but also clears the way for new growth." "Very philosophical," she teased gently. "Carver would have laughed at me." Patrick acknowledged with a small smile. "Called me a contemplative bastard and told me to get to work." "Sound advice." Patrick nodded, sipping the rich coffee. "Tomorrow, I'll contact architects, start the permit process. If we're efficient, Construction could begin within 6 months. We, Maritza raised an eyebrow. If you're interested, Patrick clarified. Your experience with off-grid systems would be invaluable. Plus, your Spanish is better than mine. Barely, she scoffed, but her eyes were warm. I'm interested. Very interested. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance among the trees. In time, Patrick knew the pain of Rose's betrayal would fade further, becoming just one chapter in a much longer story. Not forgotten ever that, but no longer defining. What would define him instead would be what he built from here, the lives he helped reshape, the community he created. For the next life, he murmured, echoing Carver's note. Maritza touched her cup to his. For the next life, she agreed. Night deepened over the jungle. Patrick Moore smiled for the first time in months. The bourbon was long gone, but the fire? That still burned no longer the cold flame of vengeance, but the steady heat of purpose, of possibility, of rebirth.